minutes ago when we did part 1 of this episode.
Same.
And then we decided to do part 2 because it was so interesting.
Same as I was, 15 minutes ago.
Okay,
Just
wow.
hopped up on my latte still.
It's a week later for everyone else. So I hope you all had a lovely
Oh,
week. And
right.
here
I'm
we are.
so self-centered of me. I
So
apologize.
wow. And what do
Wow.
you do when someone's not doing the work and they're being self-centered? Okay.
Right, there it
But
is.
I want to start out. So this is part 2 of what the heck do you do when you're working your ass off, growing and healing, feeling all the uncomfortable things. And you know what? You got these other people in your life you love very dearly. And they maybe aren't doing shit, or maybe they're just not doing it the same level, or maybe we
Mhm.
just don't like what they're doing.
Right. So
But
many options.
yes, but you know what? I wanted to start with this other question that I really liked because I think it's kind of starts out on a little bit of a positive note. And I love that someone wrote this in, which is tips for enjoying family members who refuse to do the work. They're not saying tips for how to never fucking talk to this person again. They're like, shit, man, I want to make this work. I'd like to have my relationship. And so, like, how do I actually enjoy it and not be resentful of them? What do you got? What's your tip? I have a few, but I want to hear yours.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is I think so often in relationships we quickly jump to like, here are the things that I can't stand. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that jump out to us, as opposed to like, what are the times that I do enjoy being with them? Like how can I connect with this person?
Mm,
Maybe it's not in the ways I connect in other relationships. Maybe I can't get deep with them. Maybe we can't talk about certain topics, right? Maybe we can joke around. Maybe we can do activities together. So I think that really sifting through, like, what are the times that I do enjoy being with them and pulling those out, right?
yeah.
And where there are times that bring up the fact that there are discrepancies in the work that you're doing and the work that they're doing, maybe you don't engage in those as much. That's my thought, that I think pull out the things that really have worked in your relationship.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, let's have an example of this so people understand what
Yeah.
we're talking about, right? So, let's say you have someone in your life who you really want them to work on their relationship with drinking. Maybe you don't go to bars with them. Maybe you have someone in life that you really like, oh, like, why are you still with this jerk? I hate going on double dates. Maybe you just hang out with them individually, right?
Yeah.
Um, maybe my mom is always on my ass about having kids. Maybe you don't go to your cousin's baby shower with her,
Maybe you don't
right?
go to a park. Maybe
Maybe
you go nowhere there's children.
strip club.
Maybe you go maybe you definitely go to a strip club.
That sounds definitely
I
like
think
the
that's
right
the
thing.
only option. Yes. Yes.
But right, but one of the things, right? Like, okay, like I had this friend, I can't really go deep with her. I wanted to, and so maybe all we can do is sit on the couch and watch reality TV together, and like what we can really do is gossip about like the Real Housewives.
What
You
could
want to know
be
what?
better?
And that is fine. Different relationships serve different things for us. I might have some people in my life that I can't, like philosophically, we just like don't believe the same things. I'm not going to have those deep conversations with them if I'm not like leaving like soul fulfilled the way I maybe would with someone else. That does not mean they're a bad friend. It doesn't mean they're a villain. It doesn't mean anything. It means that there's different parts of them that I relate to. And so I'm going to interact with those parts.
I think that's sometimes a misconception we have is that like all our relationships have to be the same in order for them to be fulfilling. I
Hmm.
don't think that's true. Just as you're saying, I think that there are different parts of us that can be fulfilled from different kinds of relationships. I think that's something to know is I apologize. That was my email. Can you hear that?
No,
Oh, okay. Um,
nope.
all right. That I think it's something to normalize. I think that it's okay to have different types of relationships. It's okay to not get very deep in all of your relationships. It's okay to do one thing with one friend and another thing with another friend and not be able to cross those two.
Hmm.
And so I think it's just something to normalize and say is okay. It doesn't mean that they're any less important to you or that those relationships are any less special. I just think it's okay to put them in different places in your life.
I like that.
Me too.
So, okay, so tips for enjoying family members. What if you were to say, what are the parts of them that I do enjoy? What's the parts that we have a lot of fun together? What works for us? Maybe we're not the people that just like go out to eat and like have conversation. Like maybe we need like a little bit more help in facilitating that conversation. So maybe you do activities with them, right? Like maybe, if they're like, oh, really negative, Maybe you're not gonna go on a hike with them because they complain the whole time. Like, whatever it is, like, what are the parts of them that I love and I relate to and that I wanna make work? And then what are the parts that, like, I leave feeling, like, really drained from? And how do I navigate around that? Like, what if we were to just, like, look at people as lots of different parts?
Mm,
Okay. Bum,
parts.
bum, parts. Let's answer this one. This is a really tough one, and I think, unfortunately, probably, other people experience this. How to respond to an unhealthy dad who threatens self-harm or suicide. When we have someone in our life who threatens hurt as a way to bring us closer, that is manipulation. It is. They might not be the healthiest person. They might be cognizant of it. They might even be under the influence or using a substance when they do it. But it is incredibly manipulative and it's unhealthy.
Right.
And you have to say to yourself, if somebody does that, one, I can say, okay, dad, so I'm going to send the police to your house for a wellness check. If I really think you're going to hurt yourself, then I have to call and do something about this. Right? Because I really don't want anything. I think sometimes people, they do this as threats and they've done it for so long. What if we were to take people really seriously?
Yeah. And I think, you know, if it is manipulative, that it's worked in a lot of ways because that's scary. That is so terrifying to
Yeah.
hear from your dad or anyone to say
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I'm going to hurt myself." And so we're quick to jump on that and say, "Hey, what can I do?" You know, like call them. And so it works, right? It does bring us closer to them because we're fearful. We don't want anything to happen to them.
Yeah, of course.
But I
And we
think,
feel like, "Oh, well, what if this is the one time he does it?" Right? Like, that's the
right.
fear, right? It's like, "Oh, but what if this time it's
And
different?" And he yeah.
And is that I think there's a lot of fear around if I don't take this seriously, is it my responsibility? Did I do something wrong? And so I think that taking it seriously is saying, I'm going to call the police to do a wellness check because it
Mm,
isn't your responsibility, you know? And you can say, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to make sure that you get the help that you need. As opposed to if it is manipulative, them that you calling them and you getting you it actually working, you going towards them, you saying, "Okay, I'm gonna sit with you, I'm gonna be with
yeah.
you," because then
I
the
hear how yeah.
manipulation.
I
Yeah,
hear you. I'm gonna take this seriously.
yeah,
And so it's a different way that's uncomfortable, and I think it's also like, "Okay, so then what if they're mad at me?"
let them
Then
be mad at you. Let them be mad at you.
what will
And
happen?
yeah, I think that's a big thing is that there's a fear of, okay, if I don't do this, the person's gonna be mad at me, and we try to avoid that. As opposed to let them be mad at you. Let them
Yeah.
sit and see if you can sit in that discomfort,
Yeah.
right?
Um, do we keep trying or we just give up? When is it too much?
Oof. So I would want to know, I first would want to know what does trying look like, right? What is trying? We mentioned in the first episode that sometimes we believe trying is like yelling at the person, right? It's in the heat of an argument, we're telling them to do their own work as opposed to really sitting down and saying, this is really important to me. And so I want to know what's trying for you. What does that look like?
Mm,
And does the person know how serious you are? Do they know how important it is? Do they actually know you're at the end of your rope? Right? If
ooh.
you're asking us this question, clearly you're getting to the end of your rope. And I think the term like ultimatum is have a lot of fear around that. Where I think that like ultimatums are only a problem if they're just manipulative, right? If they're not real, as opposed to if this doesn't change, I actually am going to leave and I want you to know that, right? That's okay to say. You're just being honest. That is your truth. And so I think it's important to let people know when you actually are at the end of your rope, because then it gives them the opportunity to make a change. And then if not, then you make a decision.
Mhm.
But I think people really have to know that you're at that place.
Esther Perel is a great quote. Um, all people will be married 4 or 5 times in their life, and if you're lucky, it's with the same person.
Oof.
Relationships change and grow. Right now, my husband and I are working on ending our relationship, version 1. and moving into something better. And so I think what you can also say is like, I'm ready to fucking end this and I need something new. And are you coming? I want to make something new with you. Right? When is it too much is when you're the only one doing the work. When it's too much is when you are carrying the whole ship. When it's too much is when it is filtering into every other aspect of life and hurting everything else. It is too much when it has led into just really, really difficult mental health. It's too much when children are being hurt from it and other people are at risk, right? Those are all indicators of too much. And also, sometimes it's not that bad. Sometimes we're just not happy and it feels horrible to say, and we feel like it should be so incredibly horrible, right? Like, there should be, like, abuse or drinking or, like, all of these other, like, really big things for it to be reason enough for something to end, and it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could just be 'cause, like, "Holy shit, I changed in all these ways, and that's it for me."
And I think, so I think, and this will go into our next episode at one point, how terrifying change is.
Yeah.
Whoever is listening to this, I apologize for that. I apologize for that. We I I think that making that change is so scary for people that that's why I think this question comes up a lot. And you know what? I think so, another thing we can talk about, because we're couples therapists, is that we see, something that we see in couples therapy is that sometimes couples will come in and it is so clear that one person is more willing to do the work than the other person, and that the other person might just be there to save face. That's one instance.
Yeah.
There's other instances in which that still might be the case initially, but the other person still wants to do the work, but they're slower to warm up to therapy. So that, I think, if you are in couples therapy and you're experiencing that, to know that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get both people really invested. But then there's other times in which the partner just does not want to work on it. They don't want to work. And I think that that's something to really talk about if you're in couples therapy, of like, this isn't happening, right? There are no changes that are happening. We've been at this for 6 months. Nothing is different. And I think that's something to acknowledge.
Yeah. Um, let's go this one's a family one. For my
Yeah.
brother, how do I encourage him to go to therapy and get sober? I love you, and I'm worried about your use. I love you, and would you be willing to talk to someone? I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and here's the ways it affects me. Here's the ways I'm concerned. Here's what I see. Sometimes we do not see what is happening. One of the most beautiful things we can give people sometimes is honesty. Honesty.
Honestly, honesty. And if
How
that's
would you
not
say
work,
it?
I was going to say, if that's not working, right? You'd say, I love you. I'm concerned about your drinking. Unless this changes, I'm not going to be in contact with you. Then you set the hard boundary.
Yeah. Mhm.
That is where you set the hard boundary. If nothing's changing, if it's affecting your relationship, affecting things that you really see them going down a bad path,
Yeah.
you really see that they're in huge danger.
Mhm.
You set that boundary. People need tough love in order to make changes. And you love this person. And I think that it's so important to hold them accountable too.
Mm. How to get them to understand you're doing the work, and part of that is them listening. My script, I would say, is I wanna tell you stuff. I wanna tell you something. I wanna tell you about this thing I discovered, and I'm gonna ask you to not respond and just hear me.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to just listen with no response? And then you also have to make sure you check your own anxiety that you can actually sit in no response. Part of
God,
being
that's so true.
Part of being heard is allowing yourself to be heard and then not letting your anxiety take over and be like, "Okay, well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you have to say about this?" Because then you just ask this person to listen and now you're asking for a response, right?
And
And
you're
also
undoing all of that communication you just did.
Uh-huh. And also part of getting people to listen is not unbridled self-expression, as Terry Real would say. If I
What's
am
that
telling
look
you
like?
if I am telling you a chapter book and I'm saying you can't respond to that, is that fair? If I'm telling you a chapter book, you want me to listen to a whole thing, can I get 2 sentences? Can I get a spark notes?
You know what?
Right?
You know what? Do you ever see those I don't know if it's a meme or like things where it's someone like recording someone who's like writing a text message and it's the longest text message and they're like,
Yes.
"Oh, wouldn't want to be on the other end of that." That is an example of unbridled self-expression through
That's
text. Right?
very good example, right? And like in every relationship, right? Okay, so like in my relationship, my couples therapist, I'm allowed 2 sentences. My husband's allowed 2 paragraphs because he needs that space to process and get to it. I am a very quick processor, right? So even Jen in our interactions, 1 sentence, 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, that's a way, and that's
And
exactly how
that's
I
not
am on.
unfair. That's the difference between equality and equity.
Yes. And that's the thing is that so because I will ask this from my partner, right? Like because he's quick to be like, oh, let me give you all the solutions, fix it, right? And so and so I will say to him, hey, will you just sit and listen? I don't need advice. I just need you to listen. And then when he's giving me the space to do so, I'm like, uh, uh,
That's what I mean. Like you have to then say, like, okay, I asked for this and I have to actually like receive it.
because also if you're not used to processing that quickly, sometimes it takes some time to get it out too. So give yourself the space. So I have had to explain to my husband, hey, I process things internally and then I say them, right? And so when we're having a conversation, he's a quick processor like you am, and he's just saying whatever's coming to his mind, right? And so I have had to explain to him, this is how I process things. I'm going to take some time to think about this and I'll come back to you.
Mhm.
Emily and I have had this in our relationship too a lot with like she'll present an idea to me and we're so good. We have such a good process with this now. And
But it
I
didn't
will
used to be.
no, and but we know each other so well
Yeah.
now.
But before it could have ended up with me bulldozing you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Because I
and
didn't
I
realize either.
right, and also I didn't either.
Yeah.
Like I think we're so aware of it now, like where you will say something and I will say to her, "Let me think about it." She gives me the space to think about it, and
That's
then we
hard for me
talk through
too.
it. Yeah, and you do such a good job.
But I should say, like, right, like, that's what I mean. It's like there's nothing wrong with you that it's hard for you. It's uncomfortable. It's weird. When you're the fast processor, you think, I think, especially when you go to the place of like, oh, they're mad at me, right? Like, so sometimes I'll like say an idea to Jen. It takes her a while, and I'm like, oh, she hates it. She just doesn't want to tell me. Like, I start like making up stories in my head,
I
and
would
I'm
tell
like,
you if I hated something.
but sometimes it takes you a while to decide that you hated it.
It does. No, it
Where I'm
absolutely
like,
does.
you'll send me something, and I'm like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
sent me
have to.
something last week. You sent me like, oh, it was like a plant stand thing, and I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
absolutely
yeah. I
fucking
hate
not.
it. I hate it. Yeah, I'm like, I'll look at something and I'll be like, let me think about it. It'll take me like a while. Like I'll
Okay,
really have
but
to think about it.
here's the thing though. Because of my past, I used to do that when I hated something, but I was too people pleasing to say no. So
Oh,
I then read into times when you have asked for that and make up stories in my head about, okay, last week I bought these the mushrooms. I
I
bought
was
these like
I let me just say I was out to dinner.
I know. I That's what I'm saying though. Like it's stories we make up in our mind, right? So like, okay, here's a really good
I can't
example.
do this. This is such a good one.
We're opening up
You
this
were you were
very
you were
beautiful
definitely spiraling, but keep
spiraling.
going.
I wasn't spiraling that much because I was like in a pretty good headspace, but like but I had the intro of it and I like brought myself back down, right? Okay. Redo it. We're really excited for this new location that we have.
So
It's
excited.
really big. It's in a beautiful place in Philadelphia. We get to decorate it. It's really the first time in our careers that we've opened up an office that we've had a little bit financial freedom, more than we've ever had, right? Before, I mean, you all know how we started rented fucking furniture. My brother, my brother was getting divorced from his first marriage. We took all of the fucking furniture.
And that furnished actually, we should post the for because
No,
you just no. Okay, never
we
mind.
should. No, it's so funny. So like the one was like literally like a fucking like broken leather chair from IKEA, and it was like held up by like I kid you not like 2 bricks. And it was so bad.
It was so
It was
bad.
free. And so when you go into a therapist office and you're like, this is so ugly, I want you to remember therapists do not have a ton of extra money to be putting towards decor, right? So
Give them
whatever.
time.
Yes, we're very, very excited about this new office. And we also are doing a really cool staff lounge for our clinicians. Our clinicians are just the most amazing place in the world. Sometimes it's really good to have a place to like when you're in the same office all day, it can get intense, right? So
It
we
can
we
get
start
isolating too.
isolating
So
too,
for
yeah.
them to be able to like be together, hang
Yes.
out, have space for themselves
Place
is
to hang
really
out, right?
important.
So we're
Yeah.
like doing the staff lounge and we're excited that like the rest of the office is going to kind of go on brand, but the staff lounge is going to be a little bit more funky, right? So I bought these two mushroom ottomans. They're shaped like mushrooms. They're very cute. I said it to Jen. I was like, listen, you can't say shit because I paid with it. They're so cheap. So I was like, I paid with them with my own money because it was very inexpensive. I was like, you can't say shit, right? She didn't answer because she's at dinner like a normal human being is in the evening that doesn't put their kids to bed at 7 o'clock. Okay. And I'm like, oh, she's not saying anything because she hates it. She was like drinking. She was at dinner. Like the next day, she's like, what did you even send me? I didn't fucking look at it. Love it. Adorable. Like, didn't even give a shit. Right. But because for many parts of my life, I would say, like, oh, like, let me think about that as a way of buying time to people, please. As opposed to I don't like it. I automatically have had a habit of reading into other people's behavior.
Wow.
And so that is how we can protect others.
Was that so hard with me at the beginning?
Like the beginning of our relationship.
Yeah. I guess we weren't making as many decisions as we are now.
Yeah, I think it was really different. I mean, we had such little like Jen, it wasn't
We had
there was
no money.
there was no decisions. It was like,
We were just like, well,
here's
how
the
can we
furniture,
afford?
here's the furniture you can rent, or we know somebody who's moving who's getting rid of something. Like that was
Right.
it.
Yeah, there were no decisions. It was like, we'll take what we can get.
There was no decision. So it wasn't as hard at the beginning. Now and thank God we're in the place we are now in our relationship to make big decisions and stuff.
Yes.
But okay, but also even this week we had to go to the store to buy all the flooring. We literally just went to the cheapest options.
But it's still beautiful. Still beautiful. We still save money, but we make it beautiful.
We literally like, what is under $3 a square foot? That was
Yeah,
like, that's every decision.
so exciting. But like how exciting that we get to pick out any type of flooring.
Any type of flooring is great, right?
Very exciting.
Okay, so like, right, so like ask for listening, you have to actually take it. What I asked
Yes.
for, we can't put our partners or anyone in our life, any relationship in a double bind, right? A double bind is where I say I want something from you and then I reject it when you give it to me. And then they're like, oh, what the fuck? I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
Right. And when we're uncomfortable asking for what we need, we can often put people in double binds. And when we have this like other like who we are and what we're feeling, like when your insides don't match your outsides is when you can often get into double binds.
And it's like it can be so vulnerable, right? To finally get what you need when you have been in this dynamic where you haven't been getting what you need in certain interactions. You're finally getting what you need. It opens up such a vulnerable space for you. And so you try to fill that space, right? It starts to bring up this anxiety of like, now I have this space. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
And so that might be something that takes time to get used to, right? And so if you're slower to process, it might take you a longer time to say like, okay, give me some time to get these words out, right? Like give me
Hmm.
some time to say what I need. And so it might take a few tries. It's okay if it takes a little bit of time and you need some practice with it.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got
Um,
next?
okay, I like this one. How to help people in hard times, example like grieving, without getting sucked in or enmeshed/predified, finding it hard to balance with my mom.
Mm,
There's going to be times throughout a developmental relationship cycle where there's closeness and when there's separateness, right? Closeness, death, children, weddings, like, like some developmental milestones. Often the family comes close, and then there's also individuality. We separate a little bit. Okay. It is normal, even when there's been a lot of enmeshment, to be closer at times of developmental change, like grieving. It doesn't mean it's enmeshed.
mm.
But what you do want to say is one, am I like, how is it really for me to support someone without completely taking care of them? Am I crossing boundaries with how I'm doing that? Are they crossing boundaries with how we're doing it? And how am I feeling after the interactions? Right? You're right. It's a delicate balance and it's also not perfect. Relationships are living, breathing things. They change every single day. So is the relationship with anyone else in your life.
I wonder for this person if being enmeshed and parentified is a little bit of a wound for you. And
Mhm.
so when you are called to be there for someone, there's a fear of it, especially if you have done all this work to be able to set these boundaries, to be able to take care of yourself, to be able to understand this. that wound can be opened up a little bit when you're called to um, be there for someone, especially a parent who maybe parentified you to begin with. When you are called to be there for them, support them emotionally, that can be a little triggering for that if that has been present in your relationship in the past. So, this might be a really good time to also be processing through that with a therapist, right? Like, how do I continue to find that balance between being there for my mom, but not getting sucked back in, and also being able to take care of myself as those wounds within me are being reopened? And so I think that that's hard because I think it can be re-triggering in a lot of ways if you have been gratified by this person and they are going through something and you want to be there for them. So I love what you said, Em, about figuring out what that looks like. Like, how do I be there for this person without getting completely sucked into it?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
those boundaries might need to change. What they looked like when you were younger have to be very different than what they are now. Like,
mm,
you're an adult, you get to set those boundaries, you get to define what that means. That doesn't mean you are not being there or supporting that person who's going through this grieving. And I think that that might be something to reprocess.
mm. Ooh,
Oof,
reprocess. Okay.
reprocess.
Well, on the topic of reprocess, we have to reprocess a question somebody asked it, and we're gonna have to rewrite it for them. Somebody wrote in, "My parents, how do I make them change or apologize?" I have
Ay,
to edit this question for you because the question needs to be, "How do I grieve that my parents won't change or apologize? How do I accept that my parents won't change or apologize? How do I navigate the relationship with my parents while I realize that they won't change or apologize?" We have to edit those.
that hurts.
I know. I'm
It
so sorry.
hurts. It's true. No, but it's so true. And I think it hurts because it's hard to be in that place and learn that that's gonna happen, that you have to go from expecting them to change to grieving that they're not gonna change.
Mhm.
And I also wanna say I think that that's a long process that happens. I think you go through so many ups and downs with that, where you get to the place where you're like, "Okay, maybe they're changing a little or they're not and then you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna grieve this, I'm gonna accept this," and then you might get sucked back into it. So
Yeah.
I think that that's a process that you go through for a long period of time in your relationships. Um, and I think that sometimes the grieving can feel harder than holding on to this hope. And
Mhm.
so I think that it makes sense that you're wanting to stay away from the grief because grief can be so painful. It's hard to say, "Oh, my parents didn't give me what I needed growing up." Like, I really needed so much more than I was getting from them. And I'm going to have to grieve that. And what do I do with that? Right? Like, at that point, what do I do with that? Now you're like, you're an open wound. And how do I take care of myself in that? How do I reparent myself? But sometimes holding on to hope can keep you on a hamster wheel that never ends,
Never.
always trying to control something that's out of your control
Yeah.
and that will never happen. Oh, God, we feel for you.
Yeah. I kinda wanna cry. Um,
You can. The
thanks,
space is
babe.
here.
Um, okay. How do
Wow.
you bring it up when it seems like they're completely oblivious that the balance is off? Well, is the balance being off benefiting them?
Oof. Oof. Yeah, I wish you could drop your mic, but it would fuck up
Just out.
our audio. But
Here's white out.
drop white out.
Why do I
I
have
like
white
how you
out?
just dropped it. Yeah. Okay. Great question. What year is it? Why do you have whiteout? What are you writing? And why do you have whiteout? Also, I love that you're dropping it into your hand so that
I
it
didn't want
doesn't
it to
make a
make noise
loud
to the
noise.
mic.
Wow. Really
Okay.
kind.
All right, Jen, you take that. How do we bring it up when it seems like they're completely oblivious that the balance is off?
Um, like I said, you need to bring it up at a time in which you are not activated.
Mm.
And here's the thing, if it's benefiting them and it's not benefiting you, you still get to bring it up,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to come to the same conclusion on this.
Yeah.
You are part of the relationship. And so you get to say, "Hey, I know this might be working for you. It's not working for me. I'm not happy here. Something has to change, or I'm going to continue to not be happy in this." Right? So I think that that's a misconception in our relationships, is that we need to agree that the balance is off, right? If the balance is off, then they are probably benefiting from it. And
I
so,
wouldn't want to change either.
right, who would? But if you're unhappy, that means something. And listen, it's just going to build. That shit is just going to build
Mhm.
unless you do something about it. I know it's uncomfortable. I would also ask yourself, what is the fear of bringing it up? What's the worry about how they're going to react or what's going to happen? If
Mhm.
homeostasis is thrown off, what will happen? And
Mhm.
so, but I can promise you, pushing it down or ignoring it doesn't make it go away.
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. All right, we're getting towards the end of our episode. Jen, choose. Let's get two more. Let's get two more in.
Okay. Um,
There's still so many. I don't.
there's so many. Okay. I like this, but I want to figure out what it means. We might have to sift through it a little bit.
Okay.
How to get deeper without therapizing from a fellow therapist.
So like, yeah, right? Because like we've talked about this. We had an interaction, right? One of
But
us yelled at the other, like, "Don't
at,
fucking therapize me."
at the
When was that? Who was it?
it,
I don't even know which side it was.
it was in grad school. Okay,
Yeah, but
I remember it. It was in grad school. We were on my couch. I remember everything about it. We were on my couch. You were talking about your relationship, Aaron. You and Aaron were long distance. And I just started going into therapy mode because I didn't realize that wasn't something we were doing. And you were like, you were like, listen, I don't want you to be a therapist right now. I don't think you said don't be a fucking therapist. I would have been like, oh,
yeah.
my word. But yeah, I think that's a balance you have to find in your relationships. You have to. I have learned in my relationship with my husband that I cannot talk to him like a therapist.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
It's also not part of what works about the therapeutic relationship is its consent.
Right. And
People
they're
are
not
consenting to be therapized by you when they don't sign your consent of release.
they're not your client.
Yeah.
Right. So I often have, I do this with a lot of my friends where they might reach out to me for something. And I say to them,
Ask permission.
do you want my therapeutic advice or do you want my friend advice? Most of them will always say, obviously, I want your therapeutic advice.
Yeah. Okay, but it's a good point. But advice or advice
Right.
that's yes, unbridled self-expression.
Unbridled, unbridled advice.
Advice, just giving unprecedented advice, like unrequested advice, like you are like violating someone's boundaries, right? So like say I would want always ask permission, which part of me do you want me to bring to this? Or what they're saying is like how to get deeper without therapizing them. Say to them like I want some more depth. There is play a game. The amount of motherfucking games that have come out. Our friend Mac has a wonderful card game about depth. There's the 36 questions to fall in love. They are great things to say, like, let's do this. Like, I want to have some more depth in our relationship. I want it to be consensual. I want us to be doing it together and choice together. Would you want to one night open a bottle of Fanta? Didn't want to make it about
Fanta.
alcohol. Wanna
Fanta
Fanta,
soda.
Fanta. You wanna Fanta, Fanta.
Fanta, Fanta.
I didn't want to make it about alcohol. If you want to like sit outside, listen to some music and play one of these games with me to
Hopped up
work
on
on
sugar.
a bunch of sugar.
Fanta.
Right? But like that's consent. That is getting
Yeah.
depth. And there are so many different Esther Perel, I think, has a game. I mean, there's like literally like a million of these depth games now. Just Google.
Google in-depth games. I also, especially when I'm meeting new people, um, I will say, I'll make a joke out of it and say, hey, I'm sorry, I have no social skills because I'm a therapist. Like, stop me if I'm asking too many questions. Like, so I will say if I'm going to like, please stop me. Or I'll say, like, I don't know if this is too deep, but blah, 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 blah.
Well, I mean, here's the other thing, right? Like, then it's also like one-sided, right? So you're talking about getting deep relating to two people relationship, right? If I'm just therapizing you, it's a one-way relationship. You might be getting deep, but I'm not, and then we're not actually getting deep together.
Right. And if you're a therapist,
But I have watched Jen I've never gone to a bar with Jen that she doesn't end up in the corner talking to someone about their mama issues. I mean, it is she sometimes you cannot turn it off.
it's because I
I'm like,
love
don't come near me.
it's because I love it. I love
You
it
love
so
it,
I love it.
right? But don't you think it's not real? I mean, you're going deep with them, but they're not with you. They're not asking questions back to
'Cause who
you.
who wants that? I don't. So that's what I was gonna say, is that I think that being in the therapist role can feel more comfortable in a lot of ways.
Yes.
That it's so much easier for you to give for someone else, for you to open up the space for someone else to be vulnerable with you.
Mhm.
That the real relationship comes where you're both vulnerable with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to ask yourself is like, what are these relationships that you're building? Are they fulfilling for you? Are you actually being vulnerable with them? Or do they just feel safe for you because they're being vulnerable with you and you are not opening up to them? So I think that's a really good point. I think that it's easier, especially for therapists who are on one side of it, to say it's so much easier for me to allow them to be vulnerable than to be vulnerable myself.
Yeah. Um, since today's episode was a fun spontaneous episode, we don't have a Dear Em and Jen. So I'm gonna say one
Do it.
because I think this is what people actually want to be saying. Dear Em and Jen, I desperately want depth, connection, love, and intimacy in my relationships. I don't know how to get that with some people in my life. What do I do? Because that's what I think we're really saying, right?
Yeah.
This is all coming from a place of love and belonging. So guess what? You're human. It is literally part of being a human being is the need for connection and intimacy. Intimacy is not just romantic intimacy, right? Sex, I don't even like the word physical intimacy, like, right? Like, let's just say, like, sex is fucking sex. Intimacy is like fucking depth,
We're
baby.
deep in it.
Yes, it is healing, it is powerful, it is soul filling. It is truly like, fuck, man, like I am hungry for some intimacy and you fulfill me and you make me
Yeah.
full.
Yeah.
And we all deserve to have people in our life that give that to us. And it takes work. In our relationships early on, it was easy, right? Like, remember, like when you're like a little kid, you just like fucking laugh, and like you can make this friend, you just like laugh together, and you're doing like stupid shit, and it's awesome.
Or do you remember when you would have like you would talk to someone on the phone for like hours in high school? I would like fall asleep talking to like a dude on the phone.
And what we're even talking about, right?
What the hell were we talking
But
about?
here's the thing. We let ourselves have it earlier in life. It's all the other shit that fucks us up and makes it so hard in adulthood. So that part of you, your inner child part, knows you want and need belonging. And that's what I want to encourage you to do, to relate to your relationships, to have real intimacy. And if you're not getting it in your romantic relationship, in your friendships, to one, speak up for yourself, and two people to start a dynamic, one person to change it. If you need more depth, start being more deep in them. Start being honest. Start saying that. Start saying really uncomfortable shit that scares you and see where it gets you.
I don't have a follow-up to that. That was beautiful. And that's our episode.
Even in that East Coast accent. Okay. Um, hey, thanks for listening to today's episode of Shrink Chicks. What do you got, Jen?
Oh, I'm going again.
You're just getting so good.
Thank you. I love the practice. Thank you for listening. If you think someone would benefit from this episode, send it on over to them. If you want to open up a conversation with them about them doing the work, send it on over to them. Turn it on in the car when you're with them and say, hey, whoa, just surprise them. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe and follow on Apple Podcasts. If you are looking to see a therapist, we have some incredible therapists in person in our Westchester, Pennsylvania office and in person in our Philadelphia office. Our new location is opening up mid-October. We are also seeing clients virtually in states of Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Florida, California, Massachusetts. Did I miss any? Nope. And never forget. To grow yourself, you got to know yourself. Thank you so much. We love you and we appreciate you tuning in.
See you next week.